Hi, welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home, where we talk about all of the things that make it easier to do the work that we love and the work that we sometimes don't love so much, helping care for animals. So in a number of ways that people work with animals, one of the big risks is burning out or hitting compassion fatigue. And my guest today is Kellie Snider, and I asked her if she would share her personal story about her experiences because she had put a post on Facebook about some of the effects on her. And I said, if you would be willing to share this, I think it would be really, really valuable. And she very graciously agreed, which was lovely. So thank you so much, Kellie. Thanks for coming on Unleashed.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background in working with animals?
I sure can. I have always loved animals since childhood, So when I was raising my sons, people were just starting to be not on Facebook because it didn't exist, but online discussing animals and all that kind of stuff. I never had a particular interest to be a veterinarian, and that was all people really thought of at that time. Of if you're going to work with animals, you'll have to be a vet, and so that sounded interesting, just not what I wanted to do. So I just never did anything. When I stayed home to raise my kids for a while, and during that time learned a lot about all the different kinds of things that people do with animals, and decided I'm not going to go back into the old job that I had, which was I worked at NASA. I was a technical illustrator and drafts person, and I knew that I was going to have to go back to school anyway. So I said, I'm just going to find behavior school and go there. Turned out that I live about 40 minutes from the University of North Texas, where I ended up getting bachelor's and master's degrees in behavior analysis so that I specifically could work with animals. My thesis was on dogs with aggression, and so I worked in that field for both during grad school and following, and traveled quite a bit, did a lot of seminars and that sort of thing. But I got an opportunity to start a behavior program in a local shelter it's an old shelter, nonprofit shelter, and it had been successful for a long time, but they've never had a behavior department. Mm-hmm. So I went in, and it was basically figure out what we need to have a behavior department. And so that's what I did. So for 10 years, I worked there, and it was a really satisfying career, and it involved being able to do a lot of research on my own, like trying out things, seeing if they work, reading other people's research, just doing a lot of things, and then just being around animals all the time, doing training and so forth. So the shelter that I worked with, SPCA of Texas, in the beginning of the years that I worked there, was switching over from being an animal control facility for an area north of Dallas. And they had made the decision as an organization to switch back to just being a nonprofit, so that they not being a open admission and so forth. So that may be a lot of background, but it's probably going to be relevant when I talk some more. But in an open admission shelter, of course, every animal from the community that comes to the door must be taken in, unless you can provide them another alternative that would work better for the family. So that means you often have population issues. We're in kitten season, so all the shelters are full of kittens. And if you get random kittens without moms, if you get sick kittens, if you get a lot of euthanasia decisions have to be made related to that. We also, the SPCA focused, and they still focus heavily on hoarding cases with both cats and dogs, occasionally rabbits, occasionally guinea pigs, any kind of animal you could imagine. And so these animals come in, and they're very damaged to begin with, and they've got severe illness, they've got severe well, the way I think of it, their social behavior is appropriate for what they had to live in.
Right.
They were doing the things they had to do to live in the situation they were in. They weren't damaged in the sense of behaving wrongly. They were damaged in the sense of we humans have expectations of them to be friendly and have gratitude toward us for all of the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we go in, we steal them from their only home they ever knew, even though it was horrible and they were sleeping around other dead animals and that sort of thing. We sweep them back to a concrete kennel, bedding. We provided, what comforts we could, but they usually didn't know what bedding was for. So we're seeing all these really rough sides of animal care. Right? The care is not the right word, but of people having animals.
Right.
And a lot of times, people who have, a whole lot of the times, a huge number of the times when you've got hoarding or pit bull fighting or rooster fighting, the people really, really, really do love their animals.
Yes. And that's so shocking to people to hear that. They're like, well, how could they do that if they love them? But it's a warped sense of providing.
Yeah, like with the hoarded animals, the people almost 100%. I mean, they all have some sort of mental health concerns of their own. So they may not even recognize that the animal is starving to death, and that I remember a guy who, his cat, one of his many cats, had been dead on the mantle for weeks. And when he was asked, this is a story that was told to me, it didn't happen to me, but when he was asked, what about the cat on the mantle? And he says, I just don't know what to do with it. So there's just a lot of lack of education as well as mental health issues going on. But then you go with something like dogfighting and cockfighting. With cockfighting, these people, they do know what they're doing. They make these most beautiful wooden inlaid containers for these shiny, perfect spurs that are sharp. You could kill yourself with them if you weren't careful. But that they apply to the animal, and they do it with great pride, and they spend hours and a lot of time to make these gorgeous tools to kill other birds with. And so much of it, and the similar sort of, well, it's not usually as good with fighting people. They're not as worried about being fancy, but they have a lot of the same concepts of, I love my dogs. They're proud of what their dogs can do. It's a sport to them. And yet a lot of times their dogs are severely injured and killed, and the same with the roosters. And often they don't, animals are not pet animals that you can, it's not that no pit bull has ever been made into an awesome pet. I realize that sometimes they are. But the people that read those stories online about, Michael Vick's dogs that were saved and so forth, they don't know the whole story.
Right.
We know the whole story. We know most of the whole story. And so working on the inside where this animal may have killed a lot of other animals. He may have killed people. When I worked at Dallas Animal Services, they had several cases. I was only there a short time, but they had 3 cases that I remember right off the top of my head where animals had maimed humans, and we were expected to, seriously, like pinned a little boy down and shook him in a public place where the dog was up for adoption. And the law won. The dog was let off, sent to a sanctuary. 2 other cases where people were injured, the animals were saved, and no one tended to the needs of the humans, as far as I could tell, in terms of what the city spoke about, in terms of what the community talked about was all save the dog, save the dog, save the dog.
How did that affect you and the people you worked with, that messaging?
That is kind of where I had levels of compassion fatigue up and down throughout my time there. But by that time, it was pretty, needed a break. I needed a break. And the way it affected me was like, what about that baby? You know, what about that family? And there's not a thing in the world I can do if I speak up saying it's more important to make sure that no other baby is hurt, then I'm a bad shelter person. Mm-hmm. And so it puts you in this really bad conundrum where, you know what, I know that dog, for the dog he is just being a dog. He is doing what his environment has taught him to do over his lifetime. And I get that. I don't think he's bad. What I think he is dangerous.
Yes.
So I think he needs to be euthanized. And so that really gets up to the thing. You've got people that call you killer to your face or in emails and texts. They call you names based on your decision to do the hard work. So you're criticized for it. Your city doesn't support you because half the city wants us to be a no-kill city. The other half is concerned about loose dogs that we have running all over South Dallas that maim people. And so there's nobody really looking at these. There's real life people that work in these shelter environments that have to do the work, whether you like it or not. And we have all got to get together and make a decision about what our priorities are, because all this pulling back and forth and doing things, you know, this group doing it that way and that group doing it just makes it untenable.
Right.
So as I was going through this, you know, all this push and pull, I'm expected to do this and blah, blah, blah. Well, our shelter decided to become no-kill, to work toward becoming a no-kill shelter. Mm-hmm. They brought in 30,000 animals a year. Some of them had done all sorts of things. Some of them we had no idea what their history was. We started some good things there. People that really wanted to do the right thing. I really think that the goal is to do the right thing, but I think there is a transition challenge. This had happened actually at both of the last shelters I worked with. When I was at the SPCA, the last couple of operations vice presidents that came through were working toward reducing euthanasia, reducing euthanasia.
Which is an awesome goal.
It's an awesome goal.
When taken in with the big picture.
Sometimes the animals would sit there for months and months and months. And that was without enough people to actually provide them with the work and care that they specifically needed, which was not have people go in their kennel and sit with them and overwhelm them. They needed people who had skill, and I had some wonderfully skilled staff that could do that. But not for hundreds of animals at the same time. You can't get to them all. And then with the open admission shelter, meaning you can't say no to anybody unless you've got a specific place that will take that case or an alternative for the owner. And that kind of managed intake is pretty tricky, not tricky to set up, but it's cumbersome to set up. So we had to try to please the public, both sides of the public, try to please the city of Dallas political machine. And then we had to try to do the right thing by the animal. And there wasn't anybody looking out for us, right, for my staff, for the volunteers. Beyond the volunteers probably got it better because at least they could step back. Mm-hmm. I worked 60 hours a week, and it was because there was that much work. I could have worked 80 hours a week and not gotten done with everything that needed to be done.
So what were some of the symptoms that you saw in your staff and you?
Among staff, I would see more time spent alone, not wanting to work with other people. Maybe you find them starting to come in late, taking longer breaks than they were supposed to take. I suspect, though I can't, and I would never, I would never name names on this issue anyway, but from conversations I would casually overhear, I think there was a lot of drug abuse going on outside of the office. I know of a couple of cases where it happened, on a few cases where it happened at work, and they were dealt with. But I'd hear people who they would give up bike ride all the time, and I haven't ridden my bike in 3 months. I don't spend any time with my own dog, and that was one of the things I think when it hit me the hardest was when I didn't even want to hang out with my own pets, and I love them; they're my family. My husband was just like, I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to be alone, and I have always come home and for most of my career come home and done artwork and things at night. I completely quit, and it was just there wasn't another bit of energy there. I meditate, so I used that as a healing tool, which was very helpful, but not in the sense that a lot of people think about it, but in the sense of just being able to be with the problems and just kind of just experience them without running away from them.
Yes.
Because of that running away creates all these cycles that I was just listing, like drinking too much or not doing the things. You're like, there's so much avoiding. You're not doing the things that you love to do. You're not seeing the people or spending time with your animals that you love.
Yeah, all the things that fill you back up are the things that you stop doing when you get to that point, which is such a terrible conundrum. I have a list of some of the symptoms, and you hit a lot of them just by randomly saying some of the things that affect people. But I'm going to read some here just to see if any trigger more thoughts in you. In terms of health problems, lots of chronic ailments, exhaustion, addiction, numbness, guilt, fear, anger, cynicism, hypervigilance, minimizing of problems, avoidance of people and other issues, and a sense of persecution are sort of the emotional side of it. And with a decreased sense of empathy, creativity, or the ability to embrace complexity, where we get sort of that black and white thinking. And so when you were going through, the people coming in late and taking more breaks and using drugs and not spending time in their hobbies, those are all signs of these things where we get ourselves so strung out that we have no bandwidth to creatively find our way back.
Yeah, exactly. And to not have a people-centered work environment. By that I mean, we're there for the animals. We work in shelters for the animals, but the people are the ones doing the work. And if the people are not holding it together, they can't do their best for the work, and problems happen. But the typical way that I see people in management handle these issues is not to say, set up trainings or provide support or even, you need to take a day off. Mm-hmm. You don't see any of that because sometimes a day off is gold.
Yeah.
But you need to, whatever, just having trainings where they can learn about self-care and that sort of thing. Those are not priorities. It's just push harder. You're not getting enough done. I've seen you come in late X number of times. And can we talk about it is not the question that's asked. It's like, you've got to cut it out. You've got to get better. Right. I didn't personally get that kind of discussion because I was a manager, but I certainly know the feeling of waking up in the morning and going, just the idea of getting in my car to make that trip, it was overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I have been at home for March, I think it was, when I stopped working. And I've been focusing on art and on building and making and things that don't require me to make euthanasia decisions, or to help with euthanasia decisions in large shelters, although I almost lost one to being hit by a car, but he's fine. letting my head have a chance to clear out has been amazing. And I'm at the point where I'm confident that if I went back in, I could go back in to sheltering environment and do fine, because I think I have some different tools now that, and I think one of the best things I did was just not work for a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm working, I'm selling things, I'm doing art type stuff because that's my other persona. But I'm not under that cloud all the time. Right. I'm not constantly wearing that lead raincoat that you can't get around.
Yeah.
And
sort of found yourself again in there, which is good. So you said you have more tools. If you were to go back into a shelter environment, what are some things that you personally would do differently to make sure that you stayed healthy and happy?
Part of it is that I would work toward having systems in place for supporting my staff, because a lot of the, when you're in a management position and your staff is having a hard time, that's part of your issue too, because you see them suffering. So going in the door, I would say that one of my very most critical, important tools would be we're going to have support for all staff with respect to compassion fatigue, mm-hmm. bringing people in, discussing it at meetings, having one-on-ones with staff members, and not just staff members, especially staff members that are showing signs, but not just them, because a lot of people don't show it.
Right. And
other people don't have it yet, but everybody in the shelter is at risk because of where they work. So what are preventive measures we can put in place? So I would want that to be part of my job going back in as a manager in a shelter. This is just not optional. This is what we do.
Right.
And the same for myself. When I find myself at, I'm burning the candle at both ends, and I'm leaving the house, I'm getting at work at 6:30 and coming home at anywhere from 6:30 to 8:30 at night, then that's a problem. Start putting I have to leave the office at 6. I have to leave I have to just put some limits on overdoing it. Have people I was pretty good at delegating. In fact, I just took a personality profile for a job that I'm considering, and they had me go through this thing, and that was they were like, well, she's good at delegating, so I got that going for me, because I think that's important too when you have that opportunity in your job, is you can't do it all yourself. You have people for a reason, and it's because the job's too big for one person.
Yeah. And I think that's a big risk with the animal care professionals I've seen, where you do start feeling like this has to be done and I have to do it. That we lose this perspective that we're a team and there are others around and I don't have to do everything, but we together, someone can do this. So being able to delegate is awesome.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. No matter whether you're managing one person or someone else, there's always somebody else. Do you have a team member you can spare for this project, or can we work together to assign our tasks to our teams so that we cover all the bases without burning out a few specific people? That area would be really high priority, but I would build that into routine trainings as well. I like to have a training in place where you learn the rules of the road of handling in this shelter. In this shelter, we don't yank on the collar, and here's how you teach them to walk on the loose leash. So we start with those kinds of things. And when the animals are being treated better and they start to behave better, that's easier on the staff too. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, because at shelters, we get a lot of big bully breed maniacs that have never had any manners taught. And so they can be really hard to handle. But as they start getting those skills and the animals start responding, because we've got a team of people handling them that way, then that makes it easier on the staff as well, because they're not getting beaten up every time they take this, Bruno out or whatever, because of him being so excited and leaping around. Plus, giving them skills to know when an animal is actually dangerous or when he's just a maniac that doesn't have any manners.
Yes.
And because there's a lot of confusion. Yeah, in sheltering, a lot of the entry-level people that do a lot of the hardest physical labor, cleaning the kennels, moving those dogs around, performing euthanasia, they didn't come from an animal field. They usually came from high school or from a temp agency. And their job, they didn't go back to school later in life like I did and decide, oh, this is what I really want to do and this is where I really want to be. So what happens to them is we just lose them. They quit and they go away. And so you may have a good person, and if you're not supporting them in these ways, they'll leave.
Right.
So,
and that's a huge risk, because first off, we lose great people, but we're also sending people out into the world with a scar on their heart that they're carrying forward.
Yeah, like a bad attitude about that organization. People are like, I can't go there because I heard that things are really bad there.
Yeah.
And so just on so many levels and for so many aspects of running an organization, having people that quit because they can't do it anymore, or they're burned out, or they're suffering from compassion fatigue, doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the community, because the community loses a strong confidence in that resource. And I typically don't, and there are individual cases over the years where people inside the shelter were legitimately doing something wrong. Not specifically while I was at any of the organizations I was at, but for the most part, vast majority of people that work there, they're amazing. They work hard. They have so much love and caring in their hearts, and we don't take good care of them. We don't take good enough care of the people end of the stick.
Right.
And that's got to be addressed, because it's just, we have such a hard job that we're assigned by our communities to do, which is take care of all these animals, make sure that all the people out there are taking care of all these animals correctly in the way that we as a city have decided is the correct way to care for an animal. But we don't take care of the people that are assigned to do that job.
And we give people the idea that if it is emotionally draining, that it's sort of their fault. Like if they were tougher or stronger or better, then they'd be able to handle it. And that's the worst message to send too, because then we have everybody stuffing all these feelings down instead of saying, this is incredibly difficult work, and the fact that you're so caring is an asset. But it also means that it's going to be hard. And so we do need to be people-centered and have programs that say, this is hard. How can we help?
How can we help? We're still going to love and care for all those animals.
Better.
Exactly. It's like the airplane oxygen thing. If you can't, you got to get your own on first before you can put one on the kid next to you. And I see that lacking in a lot of shelters, especially city shelters, because they have so much on their plate.
Right.
Still, they're awesome people who are there to do an important job, but they need the support. They need to know that, if I'm having a day where I'm on the edge of tears all day, that somebody's going to not come down on me for that, but they're going to take care of me for that. Because, I think it was true in both. No, it was in one of the shelters I worked in. I was 2 doors down from the euthanasia room. That was my office. I was 2 doors down. And so I saw them, dogs that I had recommended euthanasia for, dogs that I had not recommended euthanasia for, but other issues like health, or, now she's bitten somebody and all those kinds of things. And I'd watch them. I'd have that on my shoulders, watching them go down the door. We always allowed staff at that shelter staff that were trained, that were qualified to be in the room with the animal as it's being euthanized. And I have really mixed feelings about it because that's really hard.
It is.
For some people, I think it's a benefit. We used to keep cards. Some of them were shaped like hearts, and they could write a note to the animal that they knew and put it with them, so that when they were taken away, they would be just kind of a ceremony to perform. And I think things like that for some people are really valuable. But I think some people need a break.
Yeah.
And they need, you've been on the euthanasia task for the last however long period of time. Maybe you've been doing it for a week or whatever. I'm going to switch you to something else for now. You don't need to be doing that day after day after day. And maybe we'll just take you off of that job for a couple of months or however long. But those kinds of free options to punishment are not the first things that I see thought of in a lot of shelters. So it's like, if I can let a staff member go home an hour early, well, in a sense, it costs money, but it doesn't really cost money, because how much work are they going to get done while they're crying?
Right.
So if I can let them go home, get better, and come back, all systems go the next day, then that's a pretty cheap fix. And the same with other things. If they're doing a job that's really hard or aversive to them, and they do a really good job at it, look, you did an awesome job. I'm going to let you do something that you know better. And that requires getting to know your staff and making sure you know what's valuable to them and what would work as a reinforcer. And you've got all these options of reinforcers that are free or nearly free that I think we should really incorporate into how we manage people that deal with animals and people that are suffering. In fact, that should probably be somebody's job at a shelter. HR doesn't typically do that. That should probably be their job, but just have somebody who's in charge of making sure that everybody's okay and providing them with training tools and with support tools. And just mentioning, you've mentioned that you were out drinking really late for the last 3 days, and look, you want to come and talk for a minute? Is everything okay? It's those kinds of things.
It is those kinds of things. And they can be dramatic or subtle interventions that make a difference. So it could be something big where we, everybody, we're going to have an all hands meeting, we're going to do a training, or it could just be, I'm really worried. I've heard you say that 3 times lately, and that doesn't feel like the you I know. Is everything okay? And sometimes the changes are so subtle that the person themselves isn't seeing the change, but their friends and family are noticing and starting to go, you're just not you.
That's an interesting point, because after I left my last job, several friends mentioned to me, I've seen things, and my sister mentioned it, and some other friends, a couple of them are psychologists, and so this isn't their work, but they mentioned that they had seen changes in me, and I was not really zoned in on, because I was really just trying to get through the day every day. And so there's a place for your friends at work casually to kind of maybe speak up in a way that a manager couldn't, but sometimes it's up to a manager, a supervisor, or an HR person or somebody to say, you know what, I just want to make sure you're okay. You want to go out for a coffee or something. Yeah. And so that really rings true to me, because after they started mentioning it, my husband, my good friends, and was like, yeah, I've just not been all there lately. I just have been zoned out. And
it's a tough thing. But I'm so glad you're doing better now. I mean, that's...
Oh yeah. I'm doing great. I'm really happy to have been able to spend this time just doing art therapy. And we're doing a little work on our home that is nice to have coming along, and just some things that are for, like I said, I'm still selling, I'm still making money, I'm still doing some consulting, but I'm not switching from shelters to going back to working with aggressive dogs. In fact, I'm done working with aggressive dogs one-on-one. That will not be my job in the future, because that is another area.
Absolutely.
That one is, last dog I worked with was maybe a year and a half ago, and it was my second bite and working with aggressive dogs. It's the second time I've been bitten in years. And it was just like, when I'm with the family, I was in my professional mode, and I'm like, no, we can continue doing this if you want to, and here's blah, blah, blah. And I got in the car and started driving, and I had to go to the ER. The bite was that bad. And I was driving along going, okay, just replaying this event that happened in my mind. And I'm like, I missed it. I didn't see it coming, and I missed something. I think I've kind of maybe figured out what happened going since then, but it's that day and for the next many days, I didn't know why that dog bit me. I didn't know why. And I'm like, if I can't read it, it's not safe for me to be there.
And that goes back to some of those, the symptoms of being either burned out or dealing with compassion fatigue, or that our senses are a little bit deadened, and our ability to take in all the information, and it's just draining. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know that that's what happened. It very well could be. I think this dog had some training in Schutze. He was not under very good stimulus control. So that is kind of where I've gone after thinking and thinking and thinking. Fortunately, they didn't call me to come back and work with them, because I probably would have declined. But the other sad thing is that they said their next step would be to put him on a shock collar, which I found horrifying, because he's already so... Yeah. He was brought up, long story, but he was just not in a good place already.
And that is not a tool that's going to make it better.
Yeah. So I guess really the thing for me is, I had these experiences, and being in a position where I can provide support for people that have those kinds of things going on in their lives kind of gets me excited too. Yeah. Because I'm like, if we can use our own experiences and then get training and all that stuff, just learn, share with each other, and set up ways for people to open up. Or if they're, some people aren't going to pour their hearts out to you, but if they have resources, if they have ways to deal with it, that could make this hard work that has to be done, because that's what our country has decided is how we're going to manage animals. Now, other countries do it in a lot of different ways. So, but we do this, we do the sheltering system, we do rescue, we do training, and we do all these things in this way that our culture accepts to some extent. And so we need to have in place that part of the program that cares for the professional, that cares for the person.
100%. Actually, that's why I've started switching what I'm doing, because like you, I'm really motivated to do that kind of work and to learn more about that at this point, because it's so needed. It's absolutely vitally needed. And I'm really grateful to you for sharing your experiences with us, because it can be hard to talk about, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But the more we hear someone else sharing how it affected them, the more it normalizes it and says, oh, this is something that happens, and it's not that I'm not doing a good job. It's that we're not talking about the effects. So I'm really grateful to you for that. So if listeners wanted to learn more about you and the things you do, how could they find you?
You can look at my websites. I have one that's www.behaviorunlimited.com. My art website is www.paintedcatstudio.com. And you can email me at Kellie@behaviorunlimited.com or Kellie@paintedcatstudio.com. Great. And that's KELLIE.
And I will put that links in for those into the show notes so that people don't have to write these things down as they're driving. And Kellie is an amazing artist, so I'm going to beg her to let me put an image or two of her work into the show notes here. We'll see if she says yes. So thank you so much for joining me today, Kellie. I really appreciate you talking to me.
It's been wonderful. Thanks.